City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded July 5, 2022.
That doesn't work very well. I have 6 o'clock. We'll call the Plan Commission meeting to order. Director, could you call the roll, please?
Weeza.
Here.
Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson is excused. Cooper.
Here.
Ilton.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
And Schuler. Here. 6-0.
Everyone is here. I wanted to take a moment to introduce Mark Ilton. He's our newest commissioner. He's the one you probably don't recognize right off the bat. So welcome, Mark, and thank you for agreeing to serve.
Thank you.
Item number 1 is the report of the June 6th meeting of the Plan Commission. Those minutes and actions were in your packet.
Move approval.
Moved by Cooper,
Second.
seconded by Schuler. Any discussion? Hearing none. Hang on a second, because someone said they're not sure if the audio is
Oh,
working.
you're muted, that's why.
Why did you mute me?
Source of reasons.
There are good reasons, I'm sure.
It's down on the bottom.
Where are we at? Oh, there we go.
There you go.
There we go. Thanks, Maria. That was Ryan's fault. He set up the Zoom. Alrighty, we are back. And did I take a vote on that?
Not yet.
Not yet. You have a motion second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Travis Haynes, representing Candlewood Investments LLC, for a conditional use permit to construct multiple duplexes on the property located at 1400 Riverview Avenue with the parcels identified in your packet, consistent with chapter 23.01, sub 13, sub F. Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. So as the mayor mentioned, the request before you all this evening is to construct a total of 11 duplexes on the subject parcel that you see identified on the screen. The attempt taken more of a holistic approach to start off. You can see this property serves more as a buffer between the established neighborhood to the north and east, comprising exclusively of single and two-family residential uses. And again, that buffer between the more higher density residential offerings that are provided nearby, specifically south of Riverview Avenue and east or west of the subject property. So looking a little bit on the previous slide, you can see on the subject property itself, there are 2 fourplexes and the private driveways that are accommodating those 2 existing buildings. Now that was actually phase 1 of a multi-phase approved development. If you go on the next slide, this site plan was approved by the Common Council 20 years ago, back in 2002, showing a mixture of fourplex units and also duplexes more on the north and west end of the property. As you can see, between this approved site plan from 20 years ago and with the proposed site plan tonight, there are pretty significant similarities between the two. Namely, again, there's going to be duplexes proposed on the north and west ends of the property. Location of the proposed private driveways are generally in the same location. The real change is the fourplexes that were not constructed from the previous site plan. That's proposed to be swapped out with duplexes as part of this site plan. So you can see there's a total of 3 access points into the property, 1 off of Echo Dells Avenue, 2 off of Riverview Avenue. The one that you don't see is going to be located between the existing fourplexes and the 2 duplexes just to the right of where, yes. So that access point is going to be gated off, closed off. It's going to be used solely for fire EMS purposes in the event of any emergency where fire or police personnel need to gain access into the building or into the property. So as you can see in the agenda packet, there's a litany of other plans that were submitted along with the site plan. Staff took a look at those and outlined specific conditions tied to staff's recommendation of approval, namely tweaks to the landscaping plan, stormwater plans, architectural details of some of the buildings, and then lastly, as I mentioned, fire access considerations. So members of the applicant or representatives of the applicant are in attendance and can answer any questions as well.
Perfect. Before we open up the public hearing, are there any clarifying questions for any commissioners?
I just need to be educated a little bit.
Yes, sir.
The one thing that disappointed me about it was there's no sidewalks in this. And I mentioned this to Adam, and he said it's not the policy of the Plan Commission to get too bent out of shape over that particular issue. But it's the kind of thing where you see the city trying to do infilling and correcting the pedestrian access deficiencies we have all around, and then we create this, which, you know, I understand they take space and that, but it's, if you're gonna start somewhere, you're gonna start somewhere. And I don't know if this is where we should start or not, but I don't like the idea that we keep doing developments and we don't provide pedestrian access, especially when staff goes out of the way to say, this is great, this is served by pedestrian access on HH.
So
but
Commissioner
never
Hilton, I'm going to stop you there because with a public hearing, it's kind of a, and you're new, so I understand, but it's kind of a legal process that we have to go through. The commission will have their opportunity to bring up topics like that after the public hearing. So what I do is I allow questions from the commissioners, just questions that we can answer by staff before we open the public hearing, because generally, those questions are the same things that the public wants to hear. But because it's a public hearing, it's more of a legal process, so we'll save the discussion for sidewalks, and I don't disagree with you, but we'll save that discussion for after the public hearing when we're looking for action.
That's fine.
Okay? Any other questions for the director before we open the public hearing? I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony is urged to step to the lectern and state your case. Public hearing is still open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing remains open. Hearing and seeing no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed. Bring it back to the commissioners. Now, Commissioner Hilton, now it's time.
Well, that's great. I said everything I really needed to say. I'm a fan of sidewalks. I think they're important to city development, and, you know, this place may look like it's kind of far away from the beaten path, but the city will grow into that, and there will be no sidewalks in there.
Adam or Director Kanoski, can you speak to that? Because it looks
Sure.
like we do have sidewalks on the southern end.
Right. There is sidewalk along Riverview Avenue. You know, and if this was a site that wasn't adjacent to Riverview Avenue, County HH, you know, I would say that sidewalks are kind of up in the air whether or not you wanted to implement them as part of the conditions of this approval. I think that's a reasonable request, just given the higher traffic counts along Riverview Avenue, and because it is a corner lot that is going to be higher density than the surrounding neighborhood. I don't think it's an unreasonable condition to add as part of it. One thing we do look at with the Public Works Department on a regular basis is part of our sidewalk continuation program. If that fits within the plan itself, it would make even more sense. So I guess what I'm getting at is that would be an appropriate condition to add as part of this.
Commissioner Hilton, just for the sake of clarifying policy, if you would like to add that as a condition, you would move to add it as a condition, being as specific as you choose to be, and then we'd get a second, and then we'd vote on that. If it was favorable, it would then become a condition for the overall approval. Does that make sense?
Yes, and in that case, I will move that we require as a condition of this development that there be at least one contiguous sidewalk through the development.
Through the development. Okay?
To be- to
Along
be-
the west side of Echo Dells.
Yes,
Okay.
West side of Echo Dells. Okay. That's pretty clear then, right? We have a motion to add a condition that we include sidewalks on the west end of Echo Dells. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kneebone. Discussion only on that motion now. Any concerns? Thoughts?
So just to clarify, the sidewalk is only along the Echo Dells right away, not within the development itself.
Correct.
Very good.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak on that amendment?
I guess I would.
Need to come up here. Identify yourself. please.
I'm Tony. I'm here kind of on
Your
behalf
last
of
name?
Travis Gabota.
Thank you.
Where, cause there's a ditch line that runs on the north side of that property. Where does that sidewalk terminate at that point? Does there need to be a bridge to the other side? And that terminates into somebody else's. So where does the sidewalk terminate?
Generally speaking, at the property line.
Okay.
The north property line. But one thing that we might, just for clarification, adding the sidewalk on the west side of Echo Dells per staff review, so we'd work with the developer to install a sidewalk that's, not infringing upon any ditch line, if there's any other issues that may be addressed, so.
Right, because you
it's-
don't have curb and gutter there.
Correct, right.
So that's the issue right there, correct?
So is, Commissioner Hilton, is that what you intended to make with your motion?
To tell you the honest truth, no. I would have preferred to have run the sidewalk contiguous to the road that comes through the entire subdivision.
Through,
So this would be, I don't know what the name of the new little street is gonna be in there.
it's gonna be a private driveway, so it's not gonna be a street, it's not gonna be a public street at all.
All right, so, it would be along the outer perimeter, either to the north or to the west of that street. Essentially to provide access to the majority of the buildings there.
Sidewalk within the development along the private driveway is what you're requesting, not necessarily that on Echo Dells.
Yeah, I think the Echo Dell sidewalk is a great idea too, to tie them all together, but I was thinking more of the traffic inside the development.
I mean, we've had developments in the past, where we've not required that as part of duplex development. This commission might recall the Doolittle Drive, duplexes on the north and south end. We didn't include, essentially private sidewalks through there. I guess from city staff's perspective, it's the traffic along that road isn't going to be significant enough, in my opinion, to require sidewalks as part of it. It's absolutely within the purview of the plan commission if you want to add that requirement. I don't think staff's supportive of that specific requirement. I think adding sidewalk along Echo Dells, the west side, is totally acceptable and it makes sense, but requiring it within the private development itself, I'm not certain that the traffic count would call for something like that.
Okay, before we go any further, the applicant has his hand up. Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm working from the road right now, so I couldn't be there. But just to kind of tag along on what Tony had mentioned there too, it is a private drive through this property. So yeah, I would probably be animately opposed to putting sidewalks on there, and honestly, even on Echo Dells. The way it sits right now, we're sitting with a shortage of housing, and we're doing all we can to try to put up housing as affordably as possible. And just tacking on extra costs like this serves nobody's purpose, I feel like, especially with the Echo Dells where it's a sidewalk to nowhere.
Thank you. So, commissioners,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, sir.
Just a point of clarification. I know that the city has jurisdiction over sidewalks within the public right-of-way, so on a typical city street, for citations for not shoveling, for that type of a thing, and anticipation of that. Is there any policy for having that type of jurisdiction within a private driveway?
There is not. Nor would there be with this. So we're kind of in a weird place right now here because we have a motion and a second, but the motion and the second stated Echo Dells. But Commissioner Ilton made a comment that he wanted it interior to the property.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we have a motion on the floor, and that is the motion. And maybe someone can explain to me why we say that the sidewalk on Echo Dells is a sidewalk to nowhere. Why do we say that?
So I can tell you that generally on streets without curb and gutter, there's a swale there to get the water off the road. The only place that this sidewalk would go on Echo Dells is from the north end of the property to Riverview's sidewalk. So there is no continuation anywhere else in this area, as you can see on the map, where there are sidewalks. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but I think the difficulty of putting sidewalks in is the property line is gonna be very near that swale, and you need the swales in there to get the water off the road. It wouldn't be practical to put a sidewalk in and take the swales out, because then you would be increasing the damage to the road. Generally, we put in curb and gutter with sidewalks. That isn't available here.
Understood.
All right, so, Mr. Haynes, your hand is still up. Did you have some additional comments?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just forgot to take it down. My apologies.
Gotcha. Okay, so, Director, it's my understanding then that staff would not be in favor of this requirement, is that correct?
Within the development, I don't think it's necessary, but I think along Echo Dells, that does make sense. And that would be the motion that's on the floor, and I would recommend that you take a vote on that before discussing the interior.
That's exactly what I was gonna do, but you then would support,
Along Echo Dells,
Echo Dells.
yeah, I think that's a reasonable condition, just given that it is a higher density development
Okay.
within this neighborhood. You know, the long-term plan may include adding sidewalk up Echo Dells, or that could become part of the sidewalk continuation program.
okay,
But it would make sense as part of the conditions to have this.
all right. Any additional comments before we vote? Yes, sir.
I would just say that I agree with the applicant. If we're not gonna put sidewalk in a reasonable time frame up and down that whole street, there's no point to have one section that leads to nowhere.
Any other comments?
Just for clarification, there is a sidewalk that Echo Dells would connect to.
Correct,
Yes.
It's just the other end, there's nothing there yet.
correct.
Right.
But it would provide access to the side, to that main sidewalk, so
Correct.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, in this case, I anticipated being a split vote, so I'm gonna ask for a roll call.
Okay, give me one moment. Weezer,
No.
Kneebone,
Aye.
Cooper,
No.
Ilton,
Yes.
Rice,
No.
Schuler.
No.
That's 4 against, so motion fails.
Motion fails. Now, we wanna talk about something required inside the property. Now's the time to do that.
I'm not inclined to do that. I understand the burden we impose on developers sometimes. And I appreciate the fact that the Plan Commission has got history on this kind of thing. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So no, I have nothing else to say.
So,
Okay.
a motion then. for
So then we would be looking for a motion to approve the development, or conditional use rather, as presented with staff recommendations. That's what I would be looking for.
So moved.
Thank you. You have a second?
Second.
Second by Cooper. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Rice?
Sorry, yeah. Just kind of echo some comments from last month. We looked at a similar development, and the concern being that we're moving forward with some of these large developments, multiple parcels on a single lot, kind of as opposed to requiring them being on individual lots. And I understand that the density kind of as planned, you know, wouldn't fit into the zoning code as written. To city staff, are there other avenues to explore developments like this where we can get them onto individual parcels with the hope that you know, future transaction of these properties could be to individual homeowners as opposed to, you know, exclusively, you know, a large developer who has to purchase, you know, a multiple building property.
So one of the things that we've required historically on duplex development are separate water and sewer laterals as part of it. That's one way to address it. The other thing would be, and this could go back to the developer and whether or not they want to feed this information to the commission, but whether or not you would need or have a firewall between the two units. So the only way to split, if what I'm understanding of your question is, split the duplex into owner occupied on both sides, as an example, through a zero lot line development. You have to do that through separate water sewer and through a firewall between the two units. So I guess that would be a better question for the developer if they're intending to have firewalls constructed as part of the development.
Did either of you answer that, please?
Yes, there will be firewalls. It's gonna be, the center partition is gonna be built to zero lot line specs. So there will be the 3-hour firewall in between. And then, yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just a matter of, resurveying to get it to be zero lot line, but everything is gonna be built. Not that that's the intention, but, it's easier to build it than to try to renovate it later.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Quick question about, last month and this month, Commissioner Rice and, Commissioner Arnson raised the issue of, access to, dwellings like this for individual property owners, right? The question of should there be, my question is the Housing Authority looking at anything like that in terms of long-term, recommendations for type of housing for Stevens Point? I know it's not related to this, and I apologize for bringing it up, but it was,
Yeah,
tangent
we can
or-
talk offline about that,
Okay.
but the Housing Authority generally doesn't. It's
I
different
meant
than
the
it's
housing
different than
task
the
force.
county.
I meant the
Task
housing
Force is
task force,
There
I'm
you go,
sorry.
yes.
yeah.
So they are working on some things, and Director can give you an update
Okay, thank you.
offline with the task
All right.
force. Okay, again, we have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use as presented with staff recommendations. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from Matt Schneider, representing Midstate Technical College, for a conditional use permit to construct an advanced manufacturing, engineering, technology, and apprenticeship center on a property located at 5,000 Coy Drive, parcel identified in your packet, consistent with chapter 23.02, sub 1, sub D, sub 3, sub D. The acronym we're using is AMETA. Any questions? Oh, I suppose we'll go to this here. Adam?
Yeah, so the request before you all is to construct an academic facility within the city's industrial park. So the center of the picture you see on the screen, the undeveloped lot, is the property where the AMETA Center is proposed to be located. Again, you can see the property surrounding the subject parcel, all incorporated within the city's industrial park, and all house industrial manufacturing warehouse type uses. You can see on the next slide, we have, again, just an overview of what the proposed facility will look like. It'll be approximately 46,000 square feet in size, accommodating 189 on-site parking stalls. Now, should this conditional use request be approved, construction is anticipated to begin later this fall and conclude sometime mid-year 2023. And why is this request before the Plan Commission? Technical schools are a conditional use within all city zoning districts, so with this property being zoned M2 heavy industrial, conditional use permits required. So looking at the site plan a little bit further, you can see 4 different access points, both off of, 2 of them off of Coy Drive, the other 2 off of a private driveway to the west end of the property. You can see here the center of the property is the proposed facility. Now, the site plan does acknowledge 2 potential areas for expansion, likewise some potential areas for on-site parking expansions. Now, note that that is not included as part of this conditional use request, so should the time come a couple years down the road and Midstate would want to expand this facility, they would have to go through the similar process as what we're going through this evening. So included in the agenda packet as well are a litany of other plans, architectural plans showing what the building will look like, kind of finding that balance between an academic facility, but yet taking into account its location within the city's industrial park. landscaping plans, photometric plans. So overall, staff is very comfortable with the staff, with this project being brought before the Plan Commission, and would recommend approval subject to the conditions shown on the screen.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ilton, just so you're aware too, because you probably don't have the same history, Midstate has been working on this for the better part of 2 years now, working on raising the funds to do it. They have secured over 200 individual types of donors, most of them businesses, several prominent members of the community, even got a grant from the governor's office to make sure that this happens. Cities contributing, counties contributing. This is probably one of the biggest projects we'll be working on in central Wisconsin for a long time. Any questions for clarification before I open the public hearing? Okay, then I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to testify, please step to the lectern, name and address, and state your testimony. Yes, that's the way to say that. Public hearing is still open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing remains open. Hearing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. I know we've been talking about this for a long time. Everybody's pretty familiar with it and supportive of the project, so I don't think that there's a lot of questions left. Bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, need a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? I'm gonna give the second. We're a little slow today.
Was it Ilton?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion.
I have a
Go ahead.
I have a quick question. Would we might suggest that some, electric vehicle charging stations be added to?
They're already actually doing
they have
that,
some
so
in
we
there?
didn't make it a condition.
Cool. As a suggestion that they might like to. Yep, good.
We'll go to
Thank you.
Commissioner Ilton and then Commissioner Schuler.
I love the development. The synergy is just right. It's in just the right spot. It does things for people that need this type of a jump into education. So it's a tremendous thing. I'm a little bit curious as to what staff envisions as far as the traffic and the parking. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of people all of a sudden hitting the road here. We have no sidewalks, but I'm not gonna belabor that anymore. But is this gonna work well? How do we envision this working with the 4 access points and especially if we had an addition later and even more usage?
Sure. This industrial park area, Skyward had the world headquarters there. They had about 250 employees in that building. That's not there anymore. Donaldson's has reduced staff, so that the amount of people that are gonna be there is probably just slightly more than what it was in its peak. We already have things in place at the intersection of Coy and Hoover. When we reconstructed that intersection, we anticipated the traffic volume increasing eventually. It wasn't there yet based on the DOT standards, but we have infrastructure in the ground for a signalized intersection. Again, there's no curb and gutter along this whole industrial park road. So therefore, there are not sidewalks in this area at all yet either. Do you have anything to add, Adam or Ryan?
I can add one thing briefly. So during the development review, that was one of the topics of conversation between the development team and Director Badoon from the Public Works Department. Essentially, making sure that Coy Drive is of sufficient specs to accommodate not only the existing traffic flow but also the proposed traffic flow as part of this development. And one of the items that I thought is important to note that the development team can surely talk about further is, while this is an academic facility and I believe occupancy amount of students is in the low 100s, not all the students are going to be in the, not all the students, faculty, supporting staff is not going to be within the building at the same time. You're going to have spurts where people come in the mornings, afternoons, so while the occupancy load for the building is relatively high, not everybody's gonna be there at the same time, but I would defer to them for.
Thank you very much. My name is Greg Bruckbauer, Vice President of Finance and Facilities for Midstate College. Do you need my address, Mayor?
Nope.
Okay. So, first of all, Dr. Mandyke is not here tonight, and she wants to send her, best to you for letting us have the opportunity for a conditional use permit for having this building on this site. It's going to be a great bonus for our community in Stevens Point, Portage County, as well as the surrounding area. Our facility will house about 350 students, but not at any one specific time of the day, because just like, any college, we have classes 50 minutes, 3 hours, 8-hour days. So the shift work that you usually see in a manufacturing center will not take place at our buildings. They'll be coming and going throughout the day, which will lower the traffic at 7:30 in the morning, or 7 o'clock when Donaldson starts, and then at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock when Donaldson's lets out. So that traffic, we've already, like I said, we already talked about. I believe that has been pretty much resolved on that item.
Thank you. The other thing to note is it is an industrial park. There aren't really destinations to walk to. Most of them are industrial in nature. There are a few storefronts. Of course, they have, General Beer out there? Might want to walk there on a break. Commissioner Schuler?
I'd like to ask like a new commissioner process question.
Sure.
It seems that none of the conditions really have a bearing on the use or the footprint of the building, and I was curious why it would need to return for another conditional use processing.
Sure.
After.
Yeah, anytime you expand or enlarge a previous conditional use, our code does require that you have to come back for another conditional use.
Cool thing.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? We have a motion and a second.
Yep.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 5 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the city of Stevens Point to temporarily amend chapter 23.02 sub 1 sub B sub 2 sub J and chapter 23.02 sub 1 sub F sub 3 sub I of the revised municipal code of the city of Stevens Point for the purposes of allowing owner-occupied and non-owner occupied POI. It's a typo. If you read it, come on, it's funny. Is it on here too? No, it's spelled, yeah.
PLVOR.
Owner and non-owner occupied tourist rooming houses as a permitted use. Said amendment shall take effect on June 22nd, 23, and expire July 5th on 2023. What this is an amendment to our ordinance to effectively lift the restrictions of our current zoning code to allow for tourist rooming house rentals during the USGA Men's Senior Open that Century World will be hosting end of June, early July next year to accommodate the roughly 70,000 plus visitors that we're anticipating to central Wisconsin.
Yeah, there's a little bit of history here that I can discuss real quick. As some of the more tenured members of this commission may recall, we have discussed the tourist rooming house component for on and off for the last probably 5 or 6 years. So under the current code, non-owner occupied tourist rooming houses are not permitted unless you're in the R1 or R2, R4, R5 multifamily zoning districts, and that's where it's a conditional use, have a non-owner occupied tourist rooming house. If you have an owner occupied tourist rooming house where the owner currently resides at the same time as the rental occurs, it's a permitted use. You just have to go through the proper process through the county and through the city for room tax. As the mayor mentioned, we're going to have a significant influx of visitors and tourists to the Stevens Point area that we have to accommodate. And so instead of encouraging these folks to rent properties in Appleton or Wausau or Portage even, we'd like to keep them here as much as possible as part of an economic boost. And so this is a temporary relief of the current zoning code for those dates specifically. After July 5th, 2023, it would revert back to the existing code. And so for those listening online or on the city's radio station, this is temporary for only about 2 weeks or so, and would immediately revert back to the previous requirements at the end of the USGA Senior Men's Open. So just for clarification, there's a long history here of tourist rooming houses, and we've sat through and listened to a lot of testimony on that in the past.
We've been working on this too with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as Century, to try and figure out ways to accommodate the large influx that's is gonna be visiting Stevens Point here next year. Any clarifying questions before we open up the public hearing? Again, this will only be temporary if approved.
It's not really a question, it's just a statement that
Then we could take the statement after the
okay,
public hearing.
okay.
I'll
About
declare the public hearing open,
the reason.
and go ahead.
Ginger Keemer, Alder for District 3. Could you just give some examples of what type of non-owner occupied housing would be available for temporary rental? Like, would this be unoccupied apartments or like rental homes that are currently vacant? That's my first question. And then my second question is just, I noticed that, you know, given the window of the actual tournament is like 4 days, you extended it like a week on the early side. Just, I had a question about like how you selected those dates. Like, I could see people wanting to stay past the 4th. A lot of people have the week of the 4th off. Maybe they want to stay through the 9th. So yeah, just a question about how you chose the dates and what type of non-owner occupied
Okay.
rentals these would be.
I'll get to those after the public hearing.
Thanks.
Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. For the third and final time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing and hearing no one else wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Alderperson Keemer, basically any house. So I could go to Vegas for the week and rent my house out. That would be non-owner occupied. There could be a rental that currently doesn't have occupants that could get rented out for the entirety of those 10, 12 days. And then the reason that we chose those days is because most of the crews that are going to be here for the golfers, they have scouts that come out, they play the course ahead of time. The TV crews come out ahead of time. The vendors come out ahead of time. They generally don't stay after, they come in before. That week before is gonna be just as busy as those 4 days of the tournament because of all the prep work that needs to go into it. You're welcome. I understand you have a statement.
Well, I was talking with Chief Cuso, and he said hotels are full all the way to Madison already. So, I mean, we're not talking almost 2 hours away. So I think this will be a great boon to keep people here. Is the motion appropriate at this point?
Yes,
I
it
would
is.
move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Cooper. Discussion.
Just a quick comment
Yes, sir.
or question, I guess. Is the city modifying any resources available online, or, I mean, people looking to take advantage of this short-term thing? How do they get information?
Well, we're not gonna be doing that, but the Convention and Visitors Bureau may, and Century probably will.
Sure.
But that's not something that the city's gonna be listing.
Are you requiring even people taking advantage of this temporary rooming house situation to go through the necessary kind of licensing and all those channels? And that information is on the city website, or?
Yes.
Yeah, we do have a one-sheeter that explains the steps you have to go through in order to get the tourist rooming house permit. So we would make those changes, include as part of the website, and then we would provide that to like the CVB, to Central World as well.
CVB is Convention and Visitors Bureau, for those of you who may not know. I did the same thing, I'm
Yep,
sorry.
nope, it's all right. And so we will make sure, and thankfully we've got enough time to make sure this information gets out and that all the appropriate parties are aware that Matt Rice is renting his house out to a house full of golfers for the week.
Thank you.
I think you're not there anymore, are you? All right, any other discussion? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just curious, and I don't want any trade secrets revealed here, but there's gonna be a ton of people that are gonna be renting houses from people that leave. I've got a sister down in Sheboygan, and they've been through this lots. So it's a huge deal. And I'm just curious how we make sure that everybody's playing fair.
That's the
room
permitting
tax.
process.
We do also, on a very regular basis, check Airbnb and VRBO for non-compliant homes. And if we do notice that, like, there was a home on Main Street not that long ago that was renting as an Airbnb non-owner occupied, we send them a notice of violation. They have to go through the process, whether it get conditional use permit, if they're allowed to do it through the conditional use permit. But similar to what we've done historically, as we get closer and closer, we will continue to keep an eye on those specific websites to make sure that there's compliance.
And they're still required to go through the regular permitting process, they're still required to pay their room tax. All of those things are still applicable, just we're opening it up to more units during that week, 2 weeks-ish.
I guess I can just see there being a ton of word of mouth, no website usage, just lots of places. Oh, I heard so-and-so and they'll pay what, you know, and that kind of thing, cause this is a lot of money for people.
It does happen.
Yeah, and so I'm just hoping that our citizenry is, follows the application process.
Right. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 6 is a request from Doug Lynch for an exception to driveway requirements at 100 Bucol Park Street, parcel identified in your packet, consistent with chapter 23.01, sub 15, sub I, sub 3, sub K. Director.
I'll turn this over to the zoning administrator.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So typical with any driveway request, when somebody wants to resurface, reconstruct a driveway, they need to go through the proper permitting process, getting a building permit, and work through our office to make sure it's compliant with what our zoning code requires. So I'm going to go into a little bit of specificity as to the driveway specifications that Mr. Lynch is proposing. So ultimately, the submitted plans show that the proposed driveway will be, shows the proposed driveway to be 12 feet at the lot line. Now, our current driveway code requires a maximum driveway width of 24 feet at the street lot line. So that is in compliance. The reason for this driveway exception request is more so how wide the driveway is being proposed within the front yard setback. Now, just for clarification, this property is zoned single-family residential, and that requires a street setback of 25 feet. So what our driveway code says is that within the first 25 feet of the property, the driveway may not at any point exceed 36 feet in width. Now, with the applicant proposing at its widest point 55 feet within the front yard setback, that's the reason for this driveway exception request, is to seek relief and allow for that 55 feet in driveway width within the front yard setback. So you can see on the screen, left-hand portion of the screen, north is pointing upwards in this true form. That's the existing conditions of the property. The right-hand portion of the screen shows the submitted site plan. The north arrow would be pointing to the right, just for context here. So there's a couple reasons, or a couple of items that staff takes a look at for driveway variance requests as outlined in the city zoning code. Really, there's 2 items I'd like to point out in relation to the requests. First of which is a few years ago when Mr. Lynch sought to construct the attached garage that's currently located on the property. He had to obtain a conditional use permit through this body. So staff feels that by seeking that special exception back then, that having this driveway request, that asking for this driveway variance would be warranted given the previous special approval that took place. And the second reason is more so in relation to really the characteristics of the property itself. So you can see, as I mentioned, subject property connects with Bucol Park Street. Now, while Bucol Park Street is a street designated on the city's official street map, it is not a designated street right-of-way. So as you can see on the next slide, again, current conditions, sorry, it might be a little hard to see up top, but the top image of the screen shows current conditions, and the lot line would be shaded in yellow roughly about here and here. If Bucol Park Street would be a designated right-of-way, the true front lot line would be roughly where the mayor is pointing this cursor at. And the front yard setback, the first 25 feet would be that red shaded area within the picture. So why is that important? Essentially because if Bucol Park Street would be a designated street right-of-way, it would extend to 55 feet in width beyond the front yard setback, so there's no reason for asking for a driveway variance. And there's no other examples that I can recall here in the city where you have cases like this, where Bucol Park Street, while it's a street, is not street right away. So that in and of itself is enough, it warrants a driveway variance being granted, in my opinion. So I would recommend approval and be happy to take any questions, and likewise, the applicant is here in person.
Thank you. Any questions? I do have one before we get started. Because the garage was constructed after the building, now we're looking at widening the driveway area. Isn't that, you don't consider that a self-imposed hardship? You're out of order, sir.
It could be argued that that's a self-imposed hardship. However, because the plan commission did approve the site plan previously for the addition, I'm not certain that, I would agree that it's a self-imposed hardship if the city previously approved the addition.
Because it's my understanding that it was pre-approved with, or it was approved with gravel in that area, which is a permeable surface. But that's, I just needed your clarification on that. Commissioner Rice, you had a question?
I just didn't know, and hopefully city staff could just inform me. Are there any other kind of restrictions imposed by like the DNR? It just looks like what would be the far west end of the driveway is getting, you know, relatively close to the river, but maybe it's beyond typical setbacks for the DNR. Just wondering if there's any other restrictions.
Good question. No, and in fact, because this is within the city of Stevens Point, the city has the ultimate shoreline authority, as opposed to the county, who has shoreline authority as well. And our requirements state that this is an acceptable, the impervious surface up to the garage or the boathouse is acceptable.
Sure. Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Or a motion? Mr. Cooper?
I would move approval of the request with staff recommended conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Rice? Rice. Seconded by Rice. Further discussion? Comments for the audience? Hearing and seeing none. If you're in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, say nay. Nay. Motion passes. Item number 7 is discussion only. A small wind energy system ordinance. This came surprisingly because we didn't have one. We prohibit these wind energy systems within the city of Stevens Point, even though I know there's one for sure downtown. When someone had asked about it, we didn't allow it. So I asked our zoning administrator to look at some of the other area or other ordinances around that allowed alternative energies using wind. So what you have before you is kind of a rough draft of some of those key points, and we wanted to bring it up to the public for the very first time here to see what everybody thinks. So with that, Adam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, as the mayor mentioned, there's really the intent of this discussion is really centered on 2 items. First, to kind of gauge interest from the City Plan Commission. Is this something that is of interest to you to pursue further, to adopt a wind energy ordinance at some point in the future? And if yes, you know, what are some of the restrictions, what are some of the regulations that the commission feels would be warranted as part of allowing that type of use? So as the mayor mentioned, city staff took a look at what the state regulates as far as wind energy systems and how other communities, counties have adopted a similar type of ordinance. And to be blunt, the state does heavily regulate these types of uses. And maybe before I get into how the state regulates it, for the purpose of this conversation is going to center more on small wind energy systems. The state does allow these large-scale wind farms, but just since there's not a whole lot of developable land, open space that would allow for it, it's kind of a moot conversation. But again, specifically talking about how the state regulates it, first of which is that they do require a public hearing. So, you know, while it would be my personal preference to have renewable energy sources be permitted by right, unfortunately, the state at this time does require a public hearing. So should this be an ordinance in the future, applicants, interested parties would have to go through the conditional use process. Secondly, as I mentioned, state regulates both large and small wind energy systems. Small, for the purposes of this conversation, will be housing a capacity of 300 kilowatts of energy or less. Third, there are noise restrictions, specifically during the daytime hours, can't exceed 50 decibels. During nighttime hours, you cannot exceed 45 decibels. There are shadow flicker requirements. You know, you see a lot of those with more large wind energy farms. State does mandate that there cannot be more than 30 hours per year of shadow flickering that can be caused from any one type of system. Next, can't cause any signal interference for public service entities, and that's pretty standard type of requirement. Next, and this is pretty fruitful, is that if a wind energy system is beyond its useful life, the state does require that wind energy system be decommissioned and removed from the property. And then likewise, lastly, property owner has to submit an annual report to the local municipality, essentially outlining, making sure that system is properly maintained, properly in operation. Last thing that I'll mention before kicking it back to the commission for comment is that, again, with a conditional use permit, there are limitations how any plan commission can regulate these types of systems. And again, given how the state regulates it, there are restrictions as to what commission can and cannot regulate. But again, we're open ears to see, first off, is this something that you're interested in? And then what are some types of requirements that you think should be incorporated that city staff can take a look at, reach out to proper parties and see if that's doable.
Perfect, thank you. And before we get too far into it, I want to talk about too, I've already been told by some people that the small wind turbines are inefficient, that they really don't pay for themselves. But as far as I'm concerned, that's not up to me. Whether I want one or not is irrelevant, whether I think it's efficient or not is irrelevant. It's what this person, applicant, whoever that might be, chooses to do. And as a city, we've tried to hit alternative energy sources. We've streamlined our solar application process, earning us a Soul Smart designation. And I just think we owe it to the community to allow, within reason, make sure the public is safe and that we have our guidelines in place. But I think we owe it to the public to at least provide them an avenue should they choose wind as their alternative energy source. Commissioner Schuler.
Question for staff. First I want to say I think supporting any type of efforts along these lines is great. I see that the maximum height is not to exceed 20 feet to the tip of the blade. Can you describe for me a type of property where this might actually be useful or achievable?
Good question. So I think more so larger size lots, I'd say at least half acre at bare minimum, but probably talking 3/4 of an acre, acre plus. At least having more of a spacious backyard, it would be something where having a ground mount wind energy system would be doable. And if I'd like to point out really why the 20 feet. My thought process is more so 20 feet is the max height that's allowed for accessory structures, given that this wind energy system is more accessory to the house that's situated on the lot, that having some compatibility with the max height requirements would be just in a case like that.
Anything else?
I have a question. I'm
Absolutely.
trying to think how to frame it. Not knowing exactly how much 300 kilowatts of energy for a single household would be. I know sometimes neighbors will pool their funds and put up one turbine that feeds 4 houses. We could do something like that in my neighborhood. We've got a lot of space on the lots. Would there be anything that would preclude people doing that, or would that be the size of the system?
Likely, I wouldn't recommend that we start out that way. These are more for residential. We're not looking for commercial units at this point.
It might
But
make it affordable, though.
But if you do it that way, you generally need to be up higher than 20 feet. 20 feet won't cut it.
See, that's
You
what
get
I'm
it up
thinking.
higher, and then if there's a strong storm, now you have a fall zone.
That's like a wind
So
tunnel out
you-
where
you-
we
you
live.
want- But you know, but that's perfect
Yeah.
though, a smaller wind
Yeah.
generating, unit on the roof would be great, similar to like the old TV antenna kind of thing. You know, you just put it up 5 feet at the top of the house and,
There you go.
and you're good to go. I mean, you're not gonna run your entire house off of it, but you might power the margarita blender. But that's what we're looking at. What are the concerns?
gotcha.
What do you wanna make sure that we either allow or restrict? Because this is the first foray into wind energy for the city. I know the county's been had their ordinances in place for a while. You can have one larger unit per parcel. Of course, they have their safety restrictions as well, but what are some of the things that you think you'd like to see? Envision you or someone you know maybe using this, what would work for them, what wouldn't work for them as a concerned neighbor? What would you wanna be concerned about? You know, the fall zone is a biggie, obviously, but, you know, if you had a 5-foot maximum height on the roof of your house, would that be acceptable? Cause that would, in my house, it would exceed that 20-foot maximum. Freestanding, is 20 feet enough? 20 feet too much? Do you want blade diameters? You know, maybe no greater than 3 feet in diameter? I mean, this is just the initial discussion, so I'm not looking for answers right now, but it's something to think about, and that goes for the regular, everybody else who's watching and listening. What do you wanna see in our very first ever wind energy ordinance?
And one thing we can do is bring some visual examples back of what a residential structure would look like for a wind turbine. And so just something to think about as well is, you know, we're not asking for complete direction. I think what we're saying is, are we nuts? Should we send this back to staff or put this in a box, put back under the bed kind of a thing? And so if you want, just like we've done with the accessory dwelling units, a discussion, we can bring back more examples and have the discussions, that specific policy discussion, you know, in the next several months, as opposed to, you know, pushing it through right now and seeing what it looks like.
I'm thinking about our inner core and how dense things are and all of the trees and things. If there's some way that there'd be a little flexibility in to allow a review to maybe let your idea of putting something on the roof might get somebody some wind power in a real congested area and still be able, to meet safety requirements and things, so.
Good. You know, someone asked what kind of property would benefit from that 20-foot high. Mr. Lynch, who was just here, being right on the river, I bet that'd be a perfect spot for one.
And mine would, I think.
The wind that whips down that river, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Anyone?
Yeah, I just think whatever you can find as far as examples in terms of, you know, what other maybe similar sized municipalities, or even what different municipal components would look like, you know, and kind of the different sizes that I guess to you seem practical, and how those sizes maybe would vary. And I imagine noise production is gonna be a big concern for neighbors. Potentially, yeah, the visual appearance and size of it. I agree, maybe 20 feet might not be enough, but I just don't know enough about the machines. The roof mounted stuff, again, seems like it could potentially make sense too, again, depending on what kind of mechanism you have, and maybe, yeah, we can build in some variability depending on how, you know, how big the array is, how noisy it is, and then height. The other concern, I guess, that I could maybe foresee from the community would be like wildlife obstruction. You know, you hear concerns about
Birds, it's a
birds
big
and
one.
bats and things like that. Any information that you could find regarding that, and maybe if there's regulations or restrictions that other municipalities are using to kind of combat that, would be helpful.
And one thing I can note, I didn't include it just since it can get pretty convoluted, but during the application process, for somebody who's interested in a wind energy system, they have to reach out to surrounding property owners at kind of akin to what city staff does for any public hearings, send out a notification letter. If there are any adjoining property owners who, for lack of a better term, are not on board with the request, the state does require greater setback to be provided off of a quote non-participating property owner. So essentially, that's one of the safeguards that the state sort of has in place. But I mean, that's something that, you know, if we want, we can definitely bring more info on that too.
Commissioner Schuler.
Thank you for the staff. The research done to date, that's a really great start. I appreciate it very much. And Ryan had mentioned perhaps bringing back some examples of circumstances on the lot. And either if staff could, or perhaps invite someone in from the industry who could be very immediately forthcoming with, I guess, the styles of units, the variety of options there are, so that the commission can have a better feel for just what it might feel like in whatever.
It's a great idea.
So, something to think
Absolutely.
about.
Touch base with me tomorrow. I think we've got some people willing to step up already.
Especially with WLGCC. I know that's been talked about
Right.
lately.
All right,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
my electrical engineering background suggests that this is probably not gonna get utilized very much, cause it's just not gonna have the output. I can see Mr. Lynch sitting out there on his sort of little island there with his windmill going to run his ham radio thing in an emergency. This would be the kind of application where it might work, you know. I mean, 300 kilowatts or watts is not much. I would be a little bit concerned about blade size. So, I mean, the way the ordinance looks to me right now, you got a 20-foot, 10-foot pole, and you put an 18-foot blade, and you got this thing swinging all the way down to the ground and lopping off your cat's head or something. I don't know.
That's graphic.
But there may need to be some thought into what potential there is for that kind of mischief as well. And I guess the other thing I would say is, you know, if you look for wind turbines, you find them where it's really windy all the time. You know, and in the middle of a city with tall trees, they're taller than our wind turbines, basically, you don't find that. So solar, yes, and it's a lot more amenable to architecturally being blended in. These things are gonna be real kind of odd situations.
Yeah, and I had mentioned that earlier. I mean, it's not for me, but there are people who have inquired about it. Whether or not it's gonna be productive for them really isn't our concern. If they choose to do it, I wanna be able to provide an opportunity for them to try it out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I don't even know what the one downtown does. It's just a real small one, probably maybe 3 feet total in diameter, a little less.
Tells them which way the wind is blowing, maybe.
That's probably the most it accomplishes. I agree with you. Alrighty, Logan. Sorry, City Attorney
I was
Beveridge.
just gonna comment quickly. I think the thing you're thinking of downtown is actually part of a amateur weather station.
Is that what that is?
I think it's an anemometer.
Okay. Aren't they usually cups that spin around this way?
At least when
It might be. I don't know.
when we were kids, that's what came in the kit, yeah.
Yeah. All right, anything else? If anybody comes up with anything between here and the next time we talk about this, contact Community Development Department, or you can contact my office, and we will pass it along. But generally speaking, is there anyone that says, no, we should throw this away and not consider it?
I don't think we should throw it away, but I think piggybacking on what Commissioner Schuler said, we should have someone that's a professional in this area, say, with our restrictions, is it feasible to even waste our time? I didn't mean waste our time, to go through the whole process to have an ordinance that we can't use.
Well, it can help educate the people who are interested in it too, to understand more about the practicality of it.
Good.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, we did accessory dwelling units, that's over restricted. All right, we will move along then. The next item is number 8, and this is the presentation debut of Chris Claysmith, who joined our team a while back, and we are gonna be talking about comprehensive plan updates, and I have to find the other presentation. Where is it?
It's pulled up.
Where? Why can't I find it? Stop that share.
If you click
This.
the home button on the
And
keyboard.
here,
There we go.
there. But now I gotta share it again. So let's do this. And share. And share. Boom. All right, we are back to golden. Mr. Claysmith.
Thank you, Mayor. So Commissioners, this presentation is to give you an opportunity to provide some input, perhaps a verbal green light to go ahead with updating the comprehensive plan. If you're not familiar with the comprehensive plan, the formal adopted comprehensive plan that the city is currently using was approved in 2006, 2007, and we're still utilizing that plan. At this point, however, in 2014, 2015, the comprehensive plan went through an update process that was not formally approved. There were steps within that process that the consultant that worked with the city to generate that plan did not bring that into departments enough for that plan to be completely useful. That consulting firm went through some transition. And so if you have any further questions about that comprehensive planning process, I would defer to Director Karnowski. But since then, the 2022 strategic plan, People Are the Point, the strategic plan for the city of Stevens Point was adopted, and that plan highlights a few key action items for city staff to take into account for planning out the future of the city of Stevens Point. There are also a plethora of other planning documents that currently exist, and threw a few of them on here for you. I'd be happy to discuss others outside of this meeting. So the strategic plan outlines a few key action items and highlighting 4 hubs or regions throughout the city of Stevens Point. We plan on utilizing the hubs that are identified within that plan to break apart the city into 8 specific regions. These regions are not set in stone. They are flexible. They are just being used to gather public information through the public input process and to garner more community engagement. Hopefully through this process too, we will create a little more opportunity for civic engagement groups to form, to pull together a hub association, which could result in a business improvement district, neighborhood association, or some other planning body to coordinate a more formal plan for these regions. So we've split the city up into 8 particular regions that 4 of them surround those hubs. So those are our primary hubs. And throughout this process, we'll be utilizing an appreciative inquiry process to keep the conversation, the direction of the planning process forward, and a positive vision for these areas. You can go ahead to the next slide. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to.
One jumped out at me right away. We've got the town sectioned off into, what'd you say, 8 neighborhoods?
Yep.
Ironically, though, the one neighborhood that formally exists, the Old Main Neighborhood Association, is not here. Why is that?
So these are just planning zones. So it's not that we are ignoring the Old Main neighborhood within this planning process. We are just linking them up into separate corridors and regions around town.
And what's this one down here? I can't read it.
That's downtown.
Oh, no, DT.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like D1, it doesn't look like, what?
Yeah. The theory is, instead of having, arguably there's probably, 7, 8, 9, 10 neighborhoods within the city, but there are areas outside those specific geographic boundaries that are should be included as part of an overall planning area. And so instead of saying the north side should have its own individual neighborhood as opposed to the downtown, or as an example, you kind of group those 2 together, and then from that area plan, that's where you dive in. You get a much better product because you're spending more time in those specific areas looking at the requirements of a comprehensive plan, as opposed to saying, okay, this 6-block area around Old Main is the Old Main neighborhood. We should do a plan just in that neighborhood.
Gotcha.
So, because what happens outside the Old Main Neighborhood Association neighborhood impacts that immediate surrounding neighborhood, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
So throughout this process, there'll be a few key community engagement steps and opportunities, and there will also be a focus on interdepartmental planning, so that way the action items that we are proposing throughout this planning process are beneficial, useful, and feasible through our departments. So this timeline is not time-bound. This is an overlapping process where we'll be performing neighborhood surveys, being present at events.
Mostly parties in 2023.
We're having a great grand old time. And then open office hours, so that way we can accommodate other people's schedules if block parties or surveying steps aren't inclusive. The block party process I'd be happy to dive more into if you'd like, but we'll be utilizing concepts from Reimagining the Civic Commons and the Civic Imagination Project to keep those spaces forward-thinking and visionary and in a positive mindset. Again, we'll be utilizing the appreciative inquiry process to keep that conversation focused on the community's future, utilizing strong points or strengths of the community as the base. And the purpose of us doing this, as Ryan mentioned, in each of these particular zones is for us to contextualize that vision to each of those spaces and how they interact. So that way we can maintain that vision throughout all of the city, by highlighting the highly visible opportunities in each of those regions. Accessibility is a huge tenet of our planning process here. All of our surveys will be available online, but also paper copies will be available at office hours or in-person events. We have already established a relationship with CAP Services and Translation Services if we need those surveys available in Spanish or Hmong. We will be visible within the community, both in community businesses and at community events. And the hope through this process is to improve communication channels between city staff, residents, and within our alders. And I appreciate Alder Kiemer and Alder Shore for being here, as they've been very helpful in establishing how that will be helpful for them. And again, with any sort of public meeting, trying to keep the topic of conversation forward-thinking and visionary. Each space will lead with some social agreements that those spaces are going to be inclusive of the ideas that are shared. They're not an opportunity to dismantle anyone's perspectives.
And just real quick, one of the things I think this department has really been trying to do the last few years is have a better presence in the community. The whole concept of when people interact with community development is when you come to City Hall and you've got to come downtown, I think presents its own unique challenges. But I think about the neighborhood meetings we had with the accessory dwelling units. The best information and the best way that we engaged with those neighborhoods was city staff were there. We were actively participating with those neighborhoods, having conversations about what they'd like to see. And that really, actually, those neighborhood meetings kind of was a springboard towards the conversation of what could this look like with a comprehensive plan at the neighborhood area planning concept, and updating that. And as Chris mentioned, this forward thinking, a lot of times with neighborhood meetings, sometimes we get bogged down in why people are upset with city government, but trying to keep those conversations pushing forward to see what could your neighborhood look like in the future? What would you like it to look like in the future? Is really kind of the key component of this whole conversation.
And the key, of course, as you all know, is making sure that participation is open, welcoming, people feel comfortable showing up, providing their opinion, and not like, getting shot down right away. So I like the way you're doing this.
Thank you. So at the end of this process, we should come up with a few major outcomes, one being a more complete vision through all of this. As we mentioned, the breakdown of the neighborhoods, we would like to have very concrete neighborhood plans for residents to lean back on, to reference, to say, my vision is encompassed in this neighborhood plan, and that will link together for one full comprehensive plan. And then as a part of this process, we should have a simple tracking and reporting method to share with you all, and that should be our last slide. Proposing 2 different tracking and reporting methods, action tracking and data tracking. So the purpose of this comprehensive plan, or any comprehensive plan, is to improve the quality of life for our residents. We want to ensure that we are growing responsibly and that we are enhancing the lives of who we are serving. So data tracking is going to encompass those quality of life measures. What is the desired impact that we are hoping to have through all of the action that we are taking? And the action is specific action items that departments are taking within those 9 categories of any comprehensive plan. We'd like to update this annually and present to you all and to have information publicly available.
Perfect.
Just a little bit more historical context of the comp planning process itself. Wisconsin's only had comprehensive planning law since about 1999-2000, and when the original comp plan that we currently use, it's actually not the original. Our original was in 1965, so we were pretty forward-thinking in the 60s with comprehensive planning. But the current plan that we utilize, the 2005 plan, was done in conjunction with the Portage County Planning and Zoning Department, and they worked with kind of all the municipalities within the county because there was a large grant that was provided to them to go through the comp planning process. I think one thing that we have seen through the last 20 years of comprehensive planning is that although the state has these specific requirements that we have to include as part of a comp plan, there's nobody out there enforcing it, which is kind of interesting. I had a former boss that once said to me, there's no such thing as the comprehensive plan police. And so what we're seeing more of is specific communities are molding the comprehensive plan to fall within the law itself, but also to make it a better document for themselves and for their communities. This whole area planning is relatively new in Wisconsin. Really, Eau Claire and Milwaukee are the only 2 who have really done more area-specific planning, neighborhood planning. City of Madison just updated their comprehensive plan, and they didn't do area planning. They did the massive overall arching plan that we currently utilize as well. But I think at the end of the day, what we want is community buy-in, neighborhood buy-in, and recognition by the other departments and department heads that this is a plan that's worth implementing at all department levels, because this is what the neighbors, this is what the community wants. I often joke, and this is no diss to the 7th District, but if you live on the city's west side, do you care what happens on Songbird Lane on the far east side? Probably not. So are you buying into this community plan if you don't really care what happens out in that part of the city? And so the concept is you buy into a plan that you helped create that's specific to your neighborhood where you live, where you work, where you recreate, and that you get this community buy-in. From there, you get more of those conversations of neighborhood associations as well. So I get really excited about this stuff. I don't know if you can tell. And I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and I'm really excited that Chris and Adam are on board, and we're going to be able to kind of take this more forward-thinking approach to comprehensive planning, and using this body as the sounding board as these plans start to formulate, and as we start putting together the physical document itself. That'll be an important part of what the Plan Commission's going to be doing.
Mr. Schuler.
Did you want to go first?
I don't think I had anything.
Okay. I guess I like where this is going. I know that the Plan Commission is officially charged to, at certain points throughout the process, actively digest and react to the ongoing work. And I guess I'm curious if you can give just a general idea of what the kind of the rhythm of that will be for the commission. And then seeing as we are the city body that is responsible for recommending this to council, it's not our job to actively participate in the meetings that you have along the way for the public input. It's not our job to be a part of that, but are we allowed to observe? Because that would just be something I think would be really beneficial for commission members to be able to go and take in what's going on. Just know that our job is not to direct conversation. Our job is to listen very passively and then talk about it with staff when it comes to us at that point. So I guess what kind of cadence do you see for, I guess, work in general coming to the commission, and what's the commission's take on attending these things and trying to understand it as you go along?
Absolutely. So, it is our intention that when we have these public input sessions and the meetings, that we will properly notice it. And to do that, we'll have to work with the city attorney to make sure we have specific agenda items. The same way we do if council wants to attend something. But you're right. It's not up to us elected officials to push this. We should be listening to the citizens and reacting and digesting that, before we make those decisions. But Chris, you're looking at what, update every 3 months or so?
So for the cadence of it, what we're hoping to do with any formal document or information for you all to provide input on, that would be coming after those block parties. So the first, I guess, possibility for you all to provide input on one of those neighborhood level plans would be the first draft afterwards. This would be happening sometime late this fall at the earliest. And then for every consecutive neighborhood plan that gets formed, we'll be bringing the first draft of those to you to provide input, and then any consecutive drafts afterwards. So there likely will be additional drafts for you to reference, say, several times over the course of each year.
Let's try and find another phrase other than block party too.
So I like the block party.
Everybody except block party, but you're gonna do actual work here.
There will be work being done, but the hope is to maintain those spaces as open and inviting to encourage more participation.
But still black lights and glow sticks.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As long as you bring the techno music.
I will say, so historically, what we have done in the past, the comp plan was a chapter would be written, we would bring it to the plan commission. Plan commission would spend time and be like, well, there's a comma here and there shouldn't be a comma here. Send it back.
Or occupied is spelled wrong.
Yep, and then we'd spend time and we'd bring it back again, and then the body would give the nod for that specific chapter. I don't think we're gonna get into that kind of detail. I think we're gonna be looking at big picture, and then bringing the report to you. I think when staff feels comfortable saying, this is what the neighborhoods had discussed, this is the elements of the plan that are being addressed, consistent with the state law. What are your thoughts? What are your issues? What are your concerns? Because at the end of the day, yes, this body makes the recommendation to the council, but it's not the plan commission's plan, right? It's that neighborhood's plan. And you're just there to go, yeah, I think this has got some good merit, and we think it's a good plan to implement, and we should send it to council, so.
Yes.
I think this is a great approach. I mean, so many times you think comprehensive means one size fits all, and it rarely does. Particularly in a community as small as ours, there are those unique pockets. And I think other than being, what are we, the Old East, I think we should be the gateway neighborhood. But we can talk
Don't say
about
gateway.
that later. Oh, yeah,
Gateway just implies you're going through that to somewhere else.
to the heart of the city.
You wanna be the destination neighborhood.
But I think having something, like you say, that the community can buy into is gonna be the big thing. And those unique characteristics of each of these neighborhoods is gonna allow that to happen. Bring those people in, they're gonna see that it's not gonna be the same for those Easterners and Westerners and the middle folks. It's gonna be tailored to their community with their needs and their desires. So I think this is a great way to do this. Look forward to the process.
Excellent. Yeah, that is the goal, getting everybody involved, to make sure that we're listening to the people that live here.
Yep.
It's their plan, it's not ours. Alder Shore?
Thank you. Alder Shore, the second district, kind of a grab bag of reactions. First to say, I appreciate the chance of the meeting that Chris and I had. It was very constructive. This looks great. I definitely agree that the accessory unit process was a success story. We hit the pause button from here, took down a lot of comments and issues, and worked a lot of compromises into how that turned out. I have a newsletter coming out to my constituents, to my district shortly, with an item about this. I called it a block party. I know we'll strike that right balance between work and play. I'm confident in that. I remember 5 or 6 years ago, when I was just coming onto the council, going to an event at the county building. Extension had a session about comprehensive plans. I don't know, that just kind of fell out of the memory banks. More specifically, a thing that I keyed in on just now, in terms of the boundaries of the areas. So I'm just noticing that my district straddles 2 of them, which is fine. But it's sort of like redistricting. You probably don't, I don't know, I suppose any of us could go and take part in 3 of these processes, but I don't know whether you've looked at how council district lines line up with this, and if anybody would have to kind of clue into 3 or 4 of them. Thanks.
I wouldn't let us venture into anything that makes political lines neighborhood lines, because they're not.
Oh,
They
sure.
are completely separate.
No, absolutely.
So
Right.
yeah, and they change frequently.
Sure.
So I would say stick to the neighborhood personas, if you will, and keep the blocks that way.
And there's no expectation for you to participate in, if your district straddles 3 different neighborhoods, there's no expectation for you to participate actively in every single one of them in the same capacity.
Just 3 different
I
parties.
can certainly do 2.
3 different parties. All right, anything else? Again, this is an ongoing discussion. So people watching, listening, even if you see it a week later, you get some ideas, contact community development, contact your alderperson. Ryan's home phone number is 715. No, we're gonna be dealing with this for the next 1.5 to 2 years. So we wanna make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get involved. Whatever ideas pop out, nothing is off the table at this point. Anything else, Chris?
That's it.
Perfect. Then we'll move on to item number 9, which is the April and May monthly reports. Adam, are you covering that one?
Nope, I got this one.
Okay.
So you could see, we did include both April, May's reports. I'll focus more on May. Essentially, we've had a very busy few months in the community development department. Year-to-date valuation is just shy of $58 million. Again, that's declared valuation. And if you compare the last 3 years, we're ahead of even where we were in 2019, which was one of our better years. We've got footing foundation permits issued for Cousin Subs and Great Northern. The Banter Apartments, we had issued the electrical permit. We've had 2 single-family homes permits pulled as well. There's a lot of commercial projects. Our residential projects are picking up. Given the fact that we're coming out of COVID, uncertain economic times, I'm very pleased with where the city is at in terms of the number of permits that are being pulled and the declared valuations. Our 2021 was a very good year in terms of net new construction. This all translates back to the city's ability to continue to provide services through net new construction. So more than happy to answer any other questions you might have, but you can also see that we had a significant NOMO May participation in the May, what's that?
Maria's got it with community gathering. Sorry, I'm a little slow on that one.
Okay, yeah. I still like block party or planning in pints. Anyway, we had significant participation in the NOMO May this year, and I expect that to stay very busy through next year as well.
Comprehensive kegger?
Comprehensive kegger. It sounds like something we do in college. Anyway.
Any questions for the director? Alrighty, moving on to the director's report. I'm assuming that's you, Director, right?
Most days. You can see the development updates. You know, we've been, again, very busy. Great Northern Distilling did break ground on the 17th of June. The underground plumbing is completed and the concrete floor is actually poured. So the steel frame should begin going up this week or the early part of next week. So that building will start taking shape. Point Motel continues to work forward. If you drive past it currently, you can see the elevator shaft being constructed. Delta Dental's headquarters is completed. Northside Yard, building 1 and 2 are completed. The first floor is considered temporary occupancy because it's a white box, meaning that it depends on what commercial user will go into that space. So we've got final occupancy on floors 2 through 4. Convent's well underway. Everything else, I mean, it's just the projects you can see are well underway, and thanks to our zoning department and our inspection department for moving these projects forward as well. Probably the biggest change under special projects, the Downtown Business Improvement District. For a long time that had been kind of on the back burner, just with some personalities and changes in leadership, and Chris coming on board, we've decided to bring that project back to the Stevens Point Alliance. And so had a very good first meeting on the Business Improvement District. We're hopeful that we're going to be able to create the Downtown Business Improvement District, get that buy-in, and start that whole process in the early parts of 2023, 24 at the latest at this point. We talked about the comp plan, and then probably the other major update in our other updates would be Edgewater Manor. City staff did issue the request for bids for demolition and asbestos abatement. Those were issued last Friday, and so those are due on July 29th. It'll then go to finance for consideration and council for final consideration to award whomever is the selected bidder. We have had a lot of interest from companies on receiving the bid documents from all over the Midwest, which indicates we may get some favorable bidding prices, which is not something we're able to say often in the current climate, where our road projects are coming in 30% over budget because of the current bidding prices. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get that building down by this fall, and that we can go through the process of getting it prepped for redevelopment. So that's all I've got. More than happy to answer any other questions that you folks might have as well.
I forgot one very important item that the future Mrs. Karnowski participated in. The public piano has been installed in downtown Stevens Point next to the transit hub. I want to thank Rachel and her team of UWSP students for doing the artwork this year. So stop by and play us a song, Piano Man. Again, down at the transportation hub, fabulous downtown Stevens Point. Any questions for the director on his report? Yes.
I just have to say, urban planning is sexy.
You should get you a t-shirt. All right, with nothing else left on our agenda, we are going to adjourn at 7:32. Thank you all.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.